Welcome to the Law School Strategy Podcast, your weekly home for tips, advice, exclusive interviews, and other insights into landing that coveted legal job by graduation. We're here to help every law student develop their law school strategy. Don't go through law school blind. It's time to get out of the classroom, put your books down, and finish that outline later. Now, here's your host, Franklin Graves.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Law School Strategy. We're going to save a discussion with a practicing attorney for later in the episode where we talk about emoji law and how she has set herself up to be kind of an expert and go-to resource when it comes to all things emoji and whether or not there are legal protections, whether it's considered speech, all those kind of fun and interesting aspects of emoji law. But first, I am excited to welcome two guests to the show, Dennis Kennedy and Tom Mighell. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be on the show again.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Yes, for those of you that might remember, I talked with Dennis about his law school strategy and how he graduated from law school with a job a couple episodes back. So I'll definitely include a link to that in the show notes below if you want to go hear his story of going through law school, getting out of law school, and his career journey up until present day. Tom, I'll go ahead and let you kick off. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I have not actually been a practicing lawyer for almost 10 years now. I was a lawyer. I'm based out of Dallas, Texas. I graduated back in 1990 from law school and was a lawyer at an insurance defense firm in Dallas for about 18 years. During that time, I wound up starting to have a lot more interest in working with technology and helping lawyers be better at their jobs using technology. And so I left the firm after a while. I went to work for an e-discovery company for a couple of years, and now I work for a company called Contoral. They're based in California, and I still work with corporate legal departments, but I do mostly information governance. I help organizations take care of their records, their electronic documents, making sure that they keep them in compliance for e-discovery and for litigation regulatory stuff, and make sure that they are as productive as they can be using the technology that they have. So that's what I do.
Excellent. And you're also the co-host of a wonderful podcast show that I alluded to earlier that I listen to consistently, part of the Legal Talk Network, with your co-host, Dennis. So Dennis, do you want to tell us a little about what you currently do? Viewers can watch your entire episode to learn more about your career path, but tell us a little about what you do and also about the podcast that you and Tom run.
Yeah, so right now I'm senior counsel for MasterCard Digital Payments and Labs Group. I actually cover the Labs Group, which means I'm responsible for the legal work for our labs, not surprisingly, and where we do innovation and work with the newest technologies in payments tech and financial tech. Also some financial inclusion stuff from our lab in Africa that's quite interesting. Yeah, and then on the side, Tom and I are rapidly approaching our 200th episode of the Kennedy Mighell Report podcast on the Legal Talk Network, where we talk about legal technology with an internet focus, as we call it. We try to come up with new topics that both interest us and will interest our audience, and we seem to do a pretty good job of it.
I definitely agree with that statement. So I will include a link to that below in the show notes, or if you're watching on YouTube, in the description below to check out their podcast. There are some pretty amazing episodes. So the reason why we're here today, though, is to talk about law school. And I want to kind of highlight some of the technology and essential equipment needed for anybody that is about to start their 1L year or anybody that is looking to invest in some current new technology as they progress throughout their 2L, 3L, and maybe 4L year of being a law student. So I'm going to kick it off with the first question where we talk about kind of equipment technology. So let's specifically focus on a laptop or a tablet or maybe a Chromebook. Is just one of those enough? And Tom, I'll let you kick it off with the first answer.
So I think that for a law student, one is just enough. I think that when you get into law practice, that's a harder question to answer. And part of some of the questions we're going to be talking about, I'm going to qualify by saying it really depends on what you want to do when you get out of law school. Do you need to have an awareness and an understanding and a familiarity and be working in the same technology world that the law firms or companies or whatever you're going to do after law school? Or does it matter? And I say that because I'll focus it on tablets and Chromebooks. Tablets and Chromebooks are great school tools to use. They're easy to use. They take a minimum of effort. Some of them are dirt cheap, so they're very affordable for students to have, but they are not used that much in the business world, and especially Chromebooks. Tablets are, and we can talk about that a little bit more later, but Chromebooks, I think, have a niche group for students primarily, and then for certain types of businesses out there. And so I really think that if you want to be the most prepared for when you get out of law school or when you have a summer clerkship or internship, having a laptop is probably, I'm going to say, is probably your best option. But frankly, it's whatever works best for you based on your budget, whatever you have. So it's hard for me to take a firm stand on it because I think they'll all work for law school. I'm just thinking beyond the law school thing and making sure that you're prepared for what comes after that.
Excellent point. Yes, definitely important to keep abreast of new technologies and not just be solidified in one particular type of device or equipment during law school, so you can position yourself to be ready for any internship that throws any type of equipment at you. Dennis, do you have anything else to add?
Well, interestingly, I found myself last week at Michigan State's law school, and they were talking about the technology they recommend in the classroom, and they have guidelines, and they said about 75% of students use Macs these days. The rest used Windows devices, and they said basically, on their specifications, about any current computer would work. So for me, you think about what it is that you're doing in law school, and a lot of it is being in class. And so I could see going even to an iPad mini with a Bluetooth keyboard. I could see the 12-inch MacBook that I use personally because it's so light. And I guess it's sort of like, what am I going to do with that laptop in the class, and where am I going to study, and those sorts of things. And then I go back, and maybe this is old school on my part because it's been a while since I've been in law school, but I just remember the textbooks being gigantic and huge and heavy. And so like I would think the lightest device possible is what you're doing. But I think my thought is that probably whatever laptop you're using in college is probably, I don't know that you would buy a new one unless you didn't meet the requirements that the school had.
And
yes.
let me add one more thing about it, because and he was talking about an iPad mini. The reason why there's a lot of talk these days, especially in the legal community, but really in the broader general technology community, about whether the iPad is a laptop replacement. And I think that with the new iPad Pros that are out these days, I think you could make that argument. The argument is stronger. You can actually do a whole lot more on them than you could before. But here's where I draw the line. Until Microsoft offers a version of Office on the iPad that is feature for feature parity with the functionality that you would get on your laptop, I don't think it's a full laptop replacement. And so and this is part of the getting ready for practice beyond law school, is most firms and most companies are still in the Microsoft Office world. There are some that are using Google Docs, but it's not, and solo and small firms more likely than not to do that. Some companies are using Google Docs, but most people are using Microsoft Office. And that's why I think that having a device that's got Office on it is really going to be critical.
Yes, exactly. So one comment before we move on to the software side or specific recommendations side of things is, Dennis, you mentioned portability and you mentioned weight, and that was something I heavily took into consideration. I didn't buy a new laptop for law school. I bought a new laptop right as I was finishing undergrad, about a year before I was going to law school, and I went with a Sony Vaio because first of all, back then it was early 2000 or 2010, and I wanted the Blu-ray player because Sony had a monopoly on the Blu-ray technology at the time. But I also wanted it because it was extremely light. It was a plastic shell. So, however, I would follow that up to say I would not recommend a plastic hard or a plastic case for a laptop simply, and I heard you laughing, but that's simply because it does break easily. It's not very sturdy. I definitely was envious of my friends and later my wife, who ended up getting a MacBook Pro, because of the aluminum shells on those are much more sturdy. And I know a lot of newer PCs, Windows PCs, are offering the same type of aluminum casing that Macs are most well known for these days. But that's just one other comment. But so specific recommendations on PCs. Tom, I know that you just bought a new computer, so maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. But I also want to touch on, I think we kind of talked about iPads, but maybe mention kind of the hybrid too. Once you tell us what setup you ended up with, can you tell us maybe a little bit about the Surface Books and whether those are a good hybrid between a tablet and an actual fully functioning laptop?
Well, and that's exactly where I want to head, because Dennis says that 75% of the law students at Michigan State are using Macs. I think Macs are great devices. They just work, and they're easy, and they work just fine. I've always been in the Windows world, and those who use Macs and even those who use Windows will say the past history with Microsoft has not always been good. The blue screen of death, things freezing up, they don't like it as much. I will say things have changed tremendously, and what really changed it for me, and this is something that Macs can't do, is when I was able to reach out to my laptop and touch the screen and work on it. So it's the benefit of having an iPad with Windows attached to it. And so I started out with a Surface Pro. I really like the Surface Pros. They're nice devices. I'm not a big fan of the kickstand on the back, mostly because I spend a lot of time on airplanes and they're hard to put on the tray that you put down. But for school, I think they're just great. The Surface line to me is really nice, and I'm actually using a tool that really was originally designed for students, but I've made it my own, and I really like it more, and it's the new Surface Laptop. It is a laptop quality. It's not a tablet, but it has a touch screen, so you can use the touch screen, but it is as light and thin. I think most people are comparing it to the MacBook Air, except when the MacBook Air was cool, because it hasn't been updated in a while, but it is a light device. It works great. It feels great. It is reasonably priced. The one challenge with the Surface laptop is it comes designed for what they call Windows 10S, which is their mobile laptop solution. So it's designed to run apps, but for a limited time, if you're hearing this within the year 2017, you can actually upgrade for free to Windows Pro on there. It's only $49 if you don't. I think that's the cost is $49. But I automatically upgraded, so I'm running Windows on that. I really like the Surface lines, but I will say that Lenovo, Dell, Asus, they all have Windows 10 laptops that have touchscreens. That to me is what really is the powerful thing now, is to have a laptop that is either a convertible tablet, but it has to have a touchscreen. I can't go back now to a laptop that I can't just scroll things on the screen when I want to. I'm too used to using my iPad. I'm too used to being able to touch the screen, and I really like it. I've been talking for way too long, so I'll shut up and see if you or Dennis have anything else to say.
I would say the other thing to me is budget. Obviously, if you're a law student, plays this huge part in this. And the other thing that concerns me these days is that you do find law professors who believe that what they're saying is so important that they won't allow laptops in the classroom. Now, my thought would be that if you run into that situation, you just want to take a different class. But sometimes you can't do that. So I think that with budget being a factor, it's sort of tempting to me to go the tablet route, or maybe multiple computers, sort of keep the undergrad laptop that you have and maybe look at an iPad, an iPad mini. I love the Surface Pro, but sort of these aren't totally expensive or totally inexpensive devices. I love the MacBook 12-inch, awesome. MacBook Air 11-inch and 13-inch, great. But I mean, basically, you're taking notes, and so I think that my daughter, when she was an undergrad, went with the iPad mini with a case that had a built-in keyboard, and she loved it for taking notes. And then you can move those notes, through Evernote or something else onto the laptop that you're working with. So I think you could do the sort of two computer approach, but kind of look to say, okay, what is it that I actually need a laptop for? It's sort of like there's classroom and there's out of classroom both. And you could go to 2 devices, but I think that militates toward the inexpensive and lightweight computers. My concern about the Chromebooks is you kind of, if you run into internet connection issues, that makes, I mean, I know it should work okay, but that always makes me a little bit nervous. But I think it's a couple step approach. See what you have. Will it work given the IT configurations the school requires? And then look at your budget really hard. And then, like I said, I would focus really hard on the weight, and portability.
Absolutely, and adding to that, I had the multiple device approach when I was in law school, and I used a laptop, as I mentioned, but I also had an iPad that I received that had a USB keyboard, not USB, sorry, a Bluetooth keyboard that I used to take notes in Evernote. And during class, it was helpful to have an iPad that I didn't have full access to do multitasking at the time. I mean, obviously that's changing rapidly with the way that iOS is going and the future release coming up. But at the time it was an iPad 2 and you didn't have multitasking. And I was basically limited to my Evernote app where I could type notes and fill in briefs that way. And the added benefit was the ease of searching quickly through all of my lecture notes and finding things on the fly as I needed to reference old lessons. So adding to that, I think we're going to talk about software in just a little bit, but ExamSoft, I think that's, Dennis, you've mentioned already, checking with your law school's IT department to make sure they don't have any recommendations or requirements for when you get to exam time. I know a lot of law students freak out when they have to use a school supplied laptop because of all the potential issues of unfamiliarity with the device and not knowing whether it's going to run well or not with the software. But you always trust your own device more in those situations, and you don't want added stress during exam time. But I think there was actually an article, I don't have a link to it, but there's an article where ExamSoft for some of the bar exams were not supporting the Magic Touch Bar on the newer versions of the MacBook laptops. And Tom, you're shaking your head. So do you want to add anything else before we move on?
Well, it was that, and then there was also a recent story that the State Bar of Tennessee had said that you can't take the bar exam if you're using a Windows 10 computer, because I think it was the Windows 10 creators update didn't work with what it is. I don't know if it's ExamSoft, but it was the software that they would use to take the bar exam. I'm hoping that there's a fix. I mean, that's the kind of thing that Microsoft should jump up and fix in a future release. But that is unfortunately a situation. I think the MacBook Pro issue, though, was a different issue. They didn't want to. They were prohibiting you from using it in bar exams because the little touch bar gives you the ability to store information in it or to put things. So it kind of upped the cheating possibility. Where with the Tennessee bar, it was more of a technological glitch that was causing that. But those are really good points. You need to think about that when you're thinking about a device.
And the other thing is printers. That I've heard situations where, especially with the Macs, you can, if you're using a printer or the computer lab at the school, you might have printer issues. Now, my understanding is this generation of students doesn't even know what a printer is. They don't use it, so it may not be an issue. But I've heard that printing issue can be easier if you're on a Windows machine. Solution, of course, is to buy a $79 laser printer that will work with your Mac, but if you're using if you're relying on the school's computer lab, something else to take into account.
So I think that's a great segue into, especially with the newer Apple laptops, if all you have is either one or maybe 2 USB-C drives or ports on your laptop. So let's talk dongles, let's talk external monitors. I think it's safe to say at the bare minimum, you need to have some way of doing HDMI output on whatever device you're using, because most situations where you'll be giving a presentation or wanting to share your screen, you would at least have at minimum maybe an HDMI connector. But do either of you have any ideas on dongles or any other external monitors or printers even?
Dennis goes first. Dennis goes first this time.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in the MacBook and you have that one USB-C port, then I think you do need an adapter. And I like the ones that flow through the power as well. So I had a nice one that unfortunately I just broke recently. So they are a little bit more fragile than they seem, but it would flow through the power, would allow me to connect a USB, and it had the HDMI as well. So that was a really nice. Those tend to run. You know, we look on Amazon, and there's some ones that are cheap, but the reviews make you a little wary. So those could cost more. I also have a multi-hub, you know, so I have a USB C, and then it has 4 USB connections off of it. The battery life on the MacBook, and I think it's that MacBook 12-inch or anything where you have the USB-C thing. So you need to pay attention to the battery life. And so if you're going to 3 classes a day, you know, you may run into an issue of running out of battery life on a lot of devices. So possibly an external battery is something to think about. Obviously, it looks like the outlets are good. Like I said, I was just at Michigan State, and I was an adjunct at Washington University's law school. So it seems like the power sources outlets are pretty good, but having that, you know, an extra outlet, an extension cord, surge protector, you know, is great. And that can make you everybody's friend if you pull out a thing that has 6 outlets on it. And those can be really inexpensive. So sometimes I look at those travel things, but I think you're right. You kind of want to get a feel for things. I also think if you're using tablet, you want to look at those adapters as well. And I think you're right. These days, HDMI is probably the way to go, but as a speaker, and I don't know about you, Tom, but I'm always taking like a VGA adapter with me because I don't know what the projectors are going to be.
Well, I was going to say, when frankly you say that HDMI adapter, I don't know that I've been to a place lately where I could use an HDMI adapter because they're all using outdated VGA projectors. and so I agree. I think that you got to have both. What really drives me crazy about hardware these days is that no one can settle on a standard for the outlets in the computer. So I had my I had a temporary computer. I had a Lenovo laptop. It was all USB-C. There was nothing else. I had to go out and buy a separate set of dongles for HDMI and VGA. I have the Surface laptop, and the Surface laptop is taking an old school approach. It has just its regular power. It doesn't have USB-C. It has one single standard USB drive, and then it has a micro port for its VGA and HDMI. So guess what? More new dongles that I had to go buy that had to fit that. But I think those are the two at a minimum. Being able to present are at your minimum. I think Dennis is right. Having something that keeps you charged, keeps battery power up. You know, it's funny. I'm talking to you on a laptop right now, but right behind me is my desktop at work that is a 28-inch screen, and I don't have a docking station, but I think that it's because I usually keep my home computer separate from my work computer. But if that's not an issue for you, I definitely think having a docking station, and most all the brands sell something that you can connect up to there. I think that's a great idea to include so that you're not looking at the small screen all the time.
Absolutely. So when I was in law school, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say USB drives, you know, just the thumb drives, and then probably at least one external backup, you know, because I think when you're taking notes and it's like, you know, in law school, like everything depends on those final exams. Like who wants to take any risk, you know, so I'd be backing up in like 10 different places. But I think probably, several thumb drives, so you could at least, you know, in a pinch, get your data over to somebody else and then back up on a regular basis.
Yes, absolutely. And so I was going to add on that when I was in law school, I didn't actually have an external monitor that I used. I just didn't have the need for it, I guess. It would have been nice with all the legal writing memos, 1L a year that you had to do. But when I was studying for Barbary or watching online lectures of that sort, I would actually use HDMI out on my laptop and connect it into my television in my living room, and my wife would hate me, but I would just watch Barbary videos at that capacity on a bigger screen. Just because, like I think Tom, you mentioned the laptop screen can sometimes just not be enough in some instances. So
well, let me ask. So you said that you were in law school. You were a two device kind of guy with a laptop and an iPad. I know a lot of people who connect that iPad up to the laptop and have a second monitor, so they can put something on the second screen, and that may be an option if law students have 2 different different devices, they don't want to have, you may not have the main big monitor to look at things on, but if you need a little bit of extra real estate, there are both apps and connection devices that will give you a second screen if you need one.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great point. There are quite a few good apps and adapters that can actually share a screen or have extended desktop. So great point. So I want to briefly touch on this, and I think, Dennis, maybe we can start with you. Should law students worry about purchasing technology for their internships, or should that be handled by their supervisors or the organization where they'll be interning?
Yeah, I would say that at work, it would surprise me that they would want you to to bring in your own computer. I mean, there's a lot of talk about bring your own device and things like that, but probably in an internship, I don't think they would be as willing to do that. Yeah, so I mean, I think you need to let the employer make the call on that, but I just, it makes me nervous. It would make me nervous in that situation to have my personal device attached to a network. If something issue went wrong or there was data on my device, or, I mean, Tom can go into this of whether all of a sudden I've made my personal laptop discoverable because I was interning somewhere. You know, so I think I would let them make the call. And then I would say if you're in a law firm, like a big law firm setting, my sense these days is that you're probably going to get a nicer computer than the average than you would get when you started as an associate. So, I mean, you know, so you have that going for you. But I would go with their device for the security. So you're just using what they want. So you're not introducing, you know, a bunch of potential issues. I mean, as if I were the IT people with summer interns, I would want to really standardize them and get them on firm devices.
Exactly. Go ahead, Tom. I see you shaking your head too.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything to add to that, really. I mean, I think that, I mean, it depends to an extent on where the internship is. If you're working for a solo lawyer that doesn't have enough money to give you something, and they say bring your own laptop and you can do work there, then you may have to bring your own technology to do that. But I think in general, you want to rely on the employer to provide things. You don't want to have to worry about whether you have the right equipment, because their needs may be different from your expectations. And then plus what Dennis says, that the employer, their main interest is in keeping you locked down as possible so that you're not getting their information, that you're not introducing bad things into the environment, and that they want to control as much of the situation as they possibly can. So I think that should, you know, unless the employer says something to you, I really think that should be, you know, sort of a non-issue for them. They just, you know, suffer what they might get, because even though Dennis says it might be better, it depends on the firm, I think, on whether it'll be better. I think, you know, it's usually a matter of just take what you get and be happy that you've got it, and suffer through it if it doesn't happen to be all that you want it to be. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would say there's a good chance that what you're going to experience when you go to a law firm is going to be worse technology than you have on your own. You know, so you might have that great Mac that you love and stuff like that, and find out that you have you know, like this big 10-pound, you know, Dell laptop. You know, so you know, you just need to see what's going on. But law firms are driven by security these days. So I would kind of let them tell you what it is that you need to do. And then I would not expect, you shouldn't, I don't think you should incur out-of-pocket expenses for technology if you're an intern.
Agreed.
Perfect. So we've kind of covered hardware and equipment, and we've kind of touched on some software aspects when it comes to operating systems and utilizing those and the differences across different devices and equipment hardware that's available. But let's kind of transition now fully into the software technology space. So Tom, I'll kick it off with you, but any software must-haves you think for a law student?
So I think I'm going to say four things. There's four things that I think are, well, three that are must-haves and one that's I think a should-have. We've talked a lot about Word and Microsoft Office. I think having a subscription to Office 365 is important. I don't want to say it's not cheap. For a law student, I don't really have a frame of reference. It's cheaper than it has been in the past. It's I think that you can get a student edition for a relatively cheap amount. You can get multiple licenses on that. You can put it on your tablet, your phone, your PC. You can put it anywhere that you happen to need it. And the benefit of having Office 365 is it's always updating itself. You're always getting the latest features. You're not having to worry about, oh, I need to download the new version of it. It's constantly updated. So I think that's the must-have, especially if you're going to a clerkship. Everybody's going to be using Microsoft Office, and that's really what I think you need to have. I think we've talked a little bit about PDF applications, being able to read PDFs, being able to create information. I think that, you know, Adobe has its own cloud PDF tool similar to Office 365. I think that may be overkill for law students at this point. It's a subscription service. It's about $14.95 a month, I think, if you get just the one thing. That may be a little bit more than I would recommend for law students to have. There's a ton of great PDF tools out there that are a lot lower cost, have almost the same functionality as Adobe Acrobat. I still think Acrobat is the gold standard with regard to PDF creation and annotation and all of that. But I think that there are other tools out there like Neo and a couple of others that are out there that I think that it would be good PDF applications. The third one that I think is a good note-taking tool. I am now firmly in the camp that Microsoft OneNote is the best note-taking tool, period. I think lots of people like Evernote. I do like Evernote. I use it for something different. I like Microsoft OneNote because, one, it's part of your Office suite, so it's totally free. It's free on every single device you could get to it. And I think that it makes creating notebooks a whole lot more powerful, searchable, a lot more usable than Evernote happens to be. I just don't like the organization of Evernote when compared to OneNote, if we're talking about taking notes for class and things like that. The last thing that I'll mention is a task management application. So something to manage the things that you need to get done. It might be that you just keep it all in Google Tasks, or that it's something very simple. I use an app called Todoist. I think Todoist is one of the most powerful task management apps that's out there. It can do some crazy stuff when it comes to creating and organizing task lists. It uses artificial intelligence to reschedule your tasks based on when you finish them. But there's tons of other task managers that are out there, and I think that just keeping track of what you need to do on a daily basis is hard enough. Find a piece of software that can manage it for you, can send you reminders if you need that, and can reschedule things or keep them going if you wind up not doing those tasks. So those are the four that I think are kind of the big things that I think that law students should have. I'll shut up now.
So what was the PDF reader you said? Nitro or?
It's Nitro. Yeah, it was. I said something different. I meant Nitro, and
Okay.
not. Yeah, that's one of them. I'm trying to think of some others. I mean, clearly the Acrobat Reader, which I still think is a free tool to use, is a good thing to have, and I think most devices are going to come either pre-installed with that, or you should be able to download it fairly easily. But the Nitro, I think, is one tool that is, I think, pretty feature for feature similar to Acrobat. Not quite as powerful, but close.
Okay, and Microsoft OneNote is actually free regardless of if you have
Correct.
any type of Office subscription or 365 Microsoft subscription at all. So
that's right.
That's
Yep.
definitely a good point to make. One point I will add is the importance, I think, of actually having Office, a subscription to Office, or even a version of Word on your computers, because as a law student going into your 1L year, you're going to have to take legal writing, and those legal writing courses are going to be very strict on the formatting and all of the types of ways that you do your indentions and have your table of contents once you do your appellate brief. And I think a lot of that is going to be more difficult, or you might not find the appropriate resources that you need outside of using templates for Word or something like that. So I think that actually having the real Microsoft Word in this case would be a worthwhile investment.
That's really the argument all the way across for having Office, because it just has all the features, and Google Docs doesn't have all the features. WordPerfect is kind of slowly going. I don't even know if law students know what WordPerfect is these days, but it's so infrequently used, I think, by law firms. But I don't think that anything really has, especially when you have to meet both law school writing class requirements and then court briefing requirements when you get out of law school. It's the same issue. I think Word is really the only tool to use.
Great. Thank you for those tips. Dennis, I'll go ahead and kick it over to you for your recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, just to follow up on that, I think that if you use something other than Word or the Office programs, you're going to run into this exporting and conversion issue. So, you may want to take that on. I mean, I could see somebody who lived in Scrivener, say, on a Mac, and decided that it really made sense for what they were doing in law school. But I think they would be taking on some kind of conversion issue, like you said, on some of the standards. I also taught a drafting class at Washington University Law School. And so for one of the exercises, you needed to do track changes. And so I never had an issue with a student who didn't have Word, but you could run into some things like that. So I've been a user of OneNote for like 100 years, it feels like. So I second that recommendation. So OneNote's great. Evernote, I think a note-taking tool. I've heard that the upcoming version of Apple Notes, I think it's called, is supposed to be a dramatic improvement. And so you might think about the way you actually take notes. So I don't know that I would go like way different than what I did in undergrad. So if you have a system that works, go ahead and use that. Then I would look to not so much the software, but sort of the online tools. So the Dropbox, the backup tools like that. I second Tom's notion of the task manager. I mean, I use something called OmniFocus that I love. If you're an outliner, an outline tool. I'd also look at, if you're a mind mapper, a mind mapping tool. So I look again at sort of the things that you use, and then I'd also look to things that have an app version, so it's easy to go back and forth and move things around. And then especially if you're in the Windows world, to me, law school feels like this totally wild and scary public Wi-Fi network to me. So I would really amp up the security tools, the antivirus, those sorts of things, maybe in a VPN tool. Because you just don't want somebody hacking into your computer or having some other issue. And then I think that some kind of automated backup is essential, because there's just too much writing on your notes and what you've done at law school. And as a professor, I was actually really lenient with people. So if you had a computer problem and you let me know, it wasn't a big deal for me on the deadline, but I didn't have exams. I just had written assignments, and I knew I wasn't going to get around to grading them for a few days. So I was pretty easy on the deadlines. But there were a lot of professors who say, you won't experience that in the real world, and they won't cut you any slack. And they'll say, when you're at work, you won't have this thing. So having that redundancy, and that's why sort of the two-device approach is also interesting, USBs, all that sort of thing, to say, hey, if something really goes wrong, can I get something turned in on time? So a lot of things out there, but I think that probably most law students are going to have a good game plan from undergrad, and some of the tools that work there will continue to work. And then I also look to see what the law school might give you access to. So there are some tools like case management tools, other things like that, Lexis, Westlaw, those kinds of things. There's an incredible Thompson tool called Practical Law. If your law school gives you access to that, man, that is worth its weight in gold. So I looked at some of those tools as well, because they could be really, really helpful to you. And then, of course, for in those boring classes, you definitely want all your social media and gaming tools as well.
I won't say too much, but I think that most law schools, most law students these days have private Facebook groups. Or I was in law school now probably 5 or 6 years ago. So I guess the thing now is group chat apps on your phone. So I'm sure that there are a lot of group meet apps type conversations happening during really boring classes. But I want to second what you said about VPN specifically. I think that that's very important, and one that I've recommended to people that I use personally. I pay, I think, $99 a year, and I have unlimited VPN access on both my work laptop here and also my phone as well, my iPhone, and it's called Cloak VPN. It's getcloak.com, I think, is the website. But for somebody that's just using it for personal use mainly, it's definitely helpful to be able to connect to a Wi-Fi network that is public to a degree and not have to worry about the security side of things. So that's an excellent point, I think, to make, is cybersecurity is still definitely very important as a law student. And you touched on some of the legal research platforms, which I think is very important. And most, as you mentioned, most law schools include that and bundle that, and you go through 1L getting trained on how to use them, and you get your access through your law school. But are there any other online subscription type services that either one of you would recommend that you think law students need? Dennis, you mentioned a couple already.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for practicing lawyers, it's sort of funny, the Lexis Westlaw thing, because you get this great free access during law school and people get really trained on it, and they're not allowed to use it in practice because it's considered super expensive. But I think those are great tools. Like I said, part of the Thompson suite is this tool called Practical Law, which does this great summary of issues. It gives you templates. It gives you research prepared by lawyers. It's a great intro. I used it a lot when I had to. So in my class, I might have to summarize some basics of, say, doing a trademark assignment. I just use Practical Law and use that as my lecture notes. So it's a really useful tool in a lot of ways. And then you could find, especially in the clinical classes, that you get a case management tool like Clio or something like that. So taking advantage of those things, or even a proprietary tool that a law school might have, could be really useful. So it's kind of like you just need to do your homework a little bit, ask some questions, see what's out there. Because with Practical Law, when I first asked my class, they didn't think they had access to it, and a few people in the class went out and checked, and it turned out that they did. So sometimes you just got to find the right person to ask the question to.
Yeah, I think that just echoing what Dennis said, if you happen to be at one of those fortunate schools, in addition to Westlaw and Lexis providing free legal research, Clio also provides free versions of its practice management tool to law schools that want to be partners with Clio. So if you happen to be in a law school that has a relationship with Clio, it's a great opportunity. I know that one law school here in Dallas was using it to basically teach their students how to bill by entering all the time that they spent studying for class. And so they were given a Clio account on day one, and they were asked to use it, not exactly as a lawyer would use it, but they'll learn how to use practice management software by the time they come out of that first year of law school. The only other app that I'd recommend is exactly for what Dennis said, that Lexis and Westlaw are pretty good at introducing you to free legal research. It's kind of like crack. Let's get you hooked on it so that when you get out of law school, you've got to use it. I completely recommend that no matter whether you actually have a Lexis or Westlaw subscription when you get out of law school, you also download and use the Fastcase app. Fastcase is a free app to use. There are paid versions of Fastcase, but you can access basically all the case law, the major case law for all 50 states and federal government within Fastcase, the same as you could within Westlaw or Lexis. You can't shepherdize, you can't key cite, you can't do all those fancy things that the other services will do. But if you just need to look up a case, if you just need to read it, if somebody quotes something and you need to go look at it, why spend the money to log on to Westlaw or Lexis when you can look it up for free and just read it? So I think it's a good option to have, and since it's free, it's kind of a no-brainer to at least have it on your tablet or on your phone.
I was the other thing that I might add is, as you were saying, that is some kind of scanning app. Because who wants to drag those big, I mean, I assume people still have those big books, but if you were able to go ahead and do a quick scan, if you can't get an ebook version of a textbook, and just the pages that you need for the class, and then you're not lugging books around. You can buy like a cheaper, lighter backpack too. So,
Excellent. I think that the new that's one of the new features of the upcoming iOS update is the ability, and I think actually Adobe has already released their I think it's some type of AI powered image enhancer. When you snap a photo with your phone and you want to turn it into a scanned document, it can help recognize the text and do all of the kind of proper alignment that you can't really do well currently with most apps or just taking a photo of something. So I will say, I will add, if you're lucky enough to attend a law school, like here in Nashville, we have Vanderbilt University Law School, School of Law, whatever. They have access for their students to ROS, which is the artificial intelligence legal research. Is it legal research or is it more than just legal research? It's like asking questions and that kind of thing, right? I'm sure one of you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, I always see Ross as a platform where there's certain, certain applications they're trying now, and I would expect to see it build out. So I don't know, it could be like whatever we say right now will be out of date tomorrow, or, but certainly, in a few months. But I just see it as an AI platform for law where we're going to expect to see a lot of new things develop.
Great. Well, I think,
Tom, if you have thoughts on that as well.
No, totally agree. Firms are starting to use ROS, and I think it is. I mean, it's certainly a research tool. It's maybe less about case research, more about courts and judge research. But it's constantly evolving, and I think that's really the next big thing, is trying to figure out what artificial intelligence is going to mean to all the tools we've been talking about.
And if I could say one more thing, I was thinking about OneNote, and again, this is going to depend on the professors, but one of the things I like about OneNote, and this is also about using the tablet apps as well, is that OneNote gives you this ability to record the lecture, gives you the ability to, say, take a picture of the blackboard or whiteboard, and then you can also draw on your notes as well in free form. And so I think that kind of tool is really useful. I know that some professors can get funny about you recording their beautiful words and proprietary words, but the fact is, people talk fast. You don't know what's important while it's going on, and having a recording in the class could be really helpful to you.
And the best part is that a lot of what you just described, Dennis, once you put it into OneNote, it becomes searchable. Anything that you write in there, if you take a picture that has text on the picture, if it can read it well enough, it's all searchable, which means you don't have to just go searching looking for it. You can just use the search tool to get to it.
Very, very powerful.
I feel like we should go back to law school. I mean, the tools are so great.
I'm in.
Oh gosh.
No, I'm not
way
in,
better.
no.
It's way better being a teacher than a student. Let me tell you.
So speaking of searchable, let's kind of go on to our next topic that we'll wrap up here, the networking and social technologies that are available. So just both of you can answer this, and Dennis, if you want to kick it off, but should law students professionally establish themselves online through a platform like LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook or any of the other, you take your pick of social media services that start up every week, it seems like now?
Okay, so I am probably the biggest enthusiast of the social networking tools by law students. I've given a good number of presentations about it, sometimes in the face of the recommendations from the career services department at a school that the law students should not use it at all. So that's my bias. I think that it is worth mentioning that you can't be silly on these sites. I mean, you are going to be a professional, and posting, pictures of you using drugs or whatever are not going to help you in any way, shape, or form. So think about that. But I just hear so many successes of people law students who start blogs, and I know Kevin O'Keefe's Left's blog company is now making blogs freely available for law students. People have had tremendous success using LinkedIn to find internships and make connections with people. And Tom and I both know people have been incredibly successful and opened up great opportunities just by being regular tweeters on Twitter. For an extended period of time and just posting useful information. So in this market, I just don't know how it can possibly make sense not to have a really great LinkedIn presence, and then to supplement it by saying, and this is what I always recommend to students, is if you have a class where you had a good grade on a paper, or you have something like that, put it up, on your LinkedIn profile, on your blog or website, so that somebody can self-serve and go, hey, I can take a look at the writing sample. And you're also assembling a portfolio. But the main thing is that you're reaching out, you're making connections. And I can tell you that, especially if you went to a small college, or you have something unique in your background, that if you're reaching out to LinkedIn or alumni or other people with the same interest, they will take the extra step to do what they can to help you. And it's easy to ask, and it provides a great opportunity. So, I think that most people in law school have good judgment, or they wouldn't be there. But it's possible to do stupid things. Don't get me wrong. But I think that using it in a professional way, in a systematic way, in a strategic way, is going to pay off tremendously for people.
So my thoughts on this are a little bit more complicated because I'll say first, I agree. Every law student should have a LinkedIn account. I think that's kind of that's a given. I think that should happen. The presence that you have otherwise on the internet is going to depend on a couple of things. I think that it is important, and anybody who listens to our podcast often enough, we talk about this regularly, is what should your presence online look like? And should you focus on one tool over the others? And I think that our general advice is going to be, you need a place where you can start to establish your brand, whatever that brand happens to be. If you go to work for a big firm, then you may choose to not use your own personal tools to express yourself. But if you have things about the law that you want to talk about, the question is a blog the right place for you? We usually talk on the podcast about kind of this central hub and having a one location where people can go back to and they can find all of your stuff, whether it's articles you've written or blog posts that you've made or videos that you've recorded, but a place where everybody can access everything about you that you have. But where it's complicated for me is that you want to think about using Twitter or Facebook or even Snapchat or other social tools as your outpost, the places where you may have other pieces of yourself that you point people back to your hub for that information. The real question, and then where it becomes more complicated for me, and this is one of those areas where I just don't know enough about folks who are in law school now and that generation, is, are you comfortable having your current social media self? Because a lot of people in law school already have Twitter accounts, they already have Snapchat accounts, they already have established an online persona. And you have to decide, is that online persona who I want to be as my legal persona, my lawyer persona? Does that still carry over in a way that doesn't mean a problem if you try to get a job? It doesn't mean if you try to do anything else, people are going to find that and do something about it. Do you need to have a profile that goes beyond that? I know a lot of people are saying my life is an open book and you should see what I was doing when I was a kid, and it's the same and I should have no issues with that. But you got to have that conversation. You got to make that decision about whether you want to combine the personal with the professional, and that has to be the decision. I think having some sort of online presence is really important. It's deciding the smart way to go about doing it so you don't hurt your career, so that you get maximum exposure on the internet and you're still having a good time.
And then the legal profession is one that's always has created the separation of professional and personal, so that you would typically have a LinkedIn account that was very professional, that was your professional persona. And then you would do personal things on Facebook and some of the other tools, and you'd crank down the people you connected to, the rights that people had to see what you're doing on the personal side, and you'd limit that to your friends. And then you'd really build out the professional presence and keep them very separate. that I think you can do that today. I mean, it seems like today, as Tom was saying, people do more with Snapchat, Instagram. The tools are different, and then people are doing a lot more video, that sort of thing. And so it does come back to that hub and spoke. But I think if you have the hub, the central point, as either something you control completely, like your own website, or maybe your LinkedIn profile that you're linking to selected outposts, as Tom calls them, that can set you up. But I think that given the way the legal profession is, the emphasis is placed on good judgment and confidentiality and things like that. I think that saying, hey, my life is an open book is probably not the best way to go without carefully thinking through. So, I mean, sometimes I get this question about LinkedIn. Should I tell everything about myself? Politics, religion, that sort of thing. And the question is like, well, will it help me work with the people I want to? Then I lean that way. Is it going to be a problem for me? Then I would lean to be, not as willing to disclose things. But there's trade-offs in every case. But lawyers traditionally have built a pretty good line between personal and professional.
Absolutely, and I think that Tom, you mentioned very, very perfectly. You succinctly said that a lot of the newer law students have grown up on social media. I remember I've had a Twitter account, like most people have had them probably since 2008, 2009 at this point. And for some, that is all of law school, all of undergrad. And so there is a lot, and even probably parts of high school for some of the students now. And that is a huge sweeping period of time where you're growing and you're changing. And I think that it's important to look back and to make sure that what's out there truly represents the brand that you're trying to build and establish, either professionally or personally, still at this stage of your life. And Dennis, I'm going to definitely link. I remember I actually caught it when you were doing it, the career advice series with the ABA. Their Career Central, I think, is the division or group within the ABA that does the career advice series. And you did the LinkedIn profile, powering up your LinkedIn profile. So I'll definitely include a link to that below. I thought that was an excellent presentation. And if somebody's looking to try to figure out where to start, LinkedIn is the best platform, I think, to get started and the easiest to and you provide the step-by-step instructions on how to go about doing that. So link to that below in the description below here on YouTube, or if you're listening to the podcast, it's in the show notes as well. Go ahead.
It's a fabulous time in law school to build out LinkedIn connections, because those professors who really liked you undergrad will be happy to hear from you and add you as a connection. Your parents' friends will be happy. As you complete classes, your law professors may connect to you. And build slowly. You're gonna build up a set of really great connections. So if somebody looks at you on LinkedIn, they're gonna go, oh my God, you're connected to these people. If you join LinkedIn groups and you connect with some of the thought leaders in the field, then that's gonna open up incredible internship opportunities if you do it right. And there are plenty of examples of that.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, I know that on your show, you both have parting shots, if I'm not mistaken. So I just want to, I don't have anything similar on my show because I'm a sole host. I'm not going to do parting shots with myself. But do either of you have any closing statements or anything that you wanted to make before we wrap up here?
So my thing with all technology is sometimes you get wrapped up with like, what's the best thing for me to buy? And so I use this question. There's something called jobs to be done theory, but the notion is, what am I hiring the technology to do? So what is the job that this technology is doing for me? So I think the more you can kind of step back and say, what do I need technology for in law school? Is this device I'm thinking of buying primarily for the classroom? Is it primarily to use at home? I think that, and then what am I hiring it to do? What am I hiring LinkedIn to do? That if you can keep asking that question, that can really help you make better technology choices. And then in answering that question, I think that you can also allocate your budget, your small budget, better.
I have two things. I'll be like Dennis, and I'll try and squeeze two things into my parting shot, and say first is kind of not a warning, but what I think is good advice, which is pay attention to the ABA model rules and the model rules of the professional responsibility rules of the state in which you hope to be licensed when you graduate, because most of the states have now adopted the ABA model rules requirement of technological competence, that you must be familiar with the risks and benefits associated with the technology that you use to provide services to your clients. So it's not enough to just, competence doesn't mean just going to CLEs and learning about your substantive law matters now. You've got to know about technology. And so that leads me to my second thing, which is my blatant pitch for law students to attend ABA Tech Show. ABA Tech Show is the yearly conference that goes on in Chicago every year. Last year was the first year that we introduced an academic track, and so we have law professors and law students coming there to learn about, one, how to deal with legal technology in law school, but also how to get ready for it. And then when you're not attending those academic track, there are tons and tons of sessions on how to be better at all the different types of legal technology tools that are out there that lawyers are going to be using and that you as law students are going to be using when you get out. It's next March, I can't remember the dates, 6th through the 8th, 6th through the 9th. It's in Chicago. If you go to techshow.com, you'll be able to sign up, but signups won't start until October or November, so you got some time, but definitely worth the time to go.
Excellent. Thank you both very much for your time. And where can people reach you if they want to follow up with any questions? I know you're both on Twitter and everywhere. So what's the best way to reach out to you both?
No, I'm pretty easy. I'm typically, Dennis Kennedy is going to turn me up. So I'm really having on LinkedIn. So if you tell me that you want to connect and that you love this video, then I'm probably going to connect with you. And then I'm at DennisKennedy.com. So you can find a lot of my stuff there. So I'm all over the place, but there aren't a lot of Dennis Kennedys, and I've kind of monopolized the search results on the ones that are out there.
Can you repeat your Twitter handle? I think that got cut off by lag a little bit.
So Twitter, I'm at Dennis Kennedy. I'm also at D Kennedy blog, because my blog, which I've anthropomorphized, had to have its own Twitter account. So I do slightly different things on each Twitter account.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Tom, go ahead.
And you can get to me on Twitter at Tom Mighell. I am probably the only Tom Mighell that's on Google, just how my last name is spelled. So you'll be able to find me easily. I don't blog as often as I should at Inter Alia, but I keep claiming that's going to start back up again as soon as I find the time to do it. But frankly, you can reach me at tmighell@gmail.com, and I'm happy to talk about technology all the time.
Awesome. Thank you both again, and I look forward to keeping in touch, and thank you for watching. So now we will switch over to our interview with Gabriella and talk about how she graduated from law school with a job and what she's been up to, establishing herself as the go-to resource for all things emoji law. Hi, and welcome to another episode of How I Graduated from Law School with a Job. On this week's episode, I'm excited to welcome Gabriella Ziccarelli from Washington, D.C. Hey, Gabriella.
Hi, how's it going?
Doing well. Thank you so much for joining. I'm really excited. I love your story and some of the insights that you'll share, and I can't wait for law students and recent grads to hear everything that you have to offer for them today. So I'll go ahead and kick it off with the first question. What did you do before law school, and then why did you end up going to law school?
Sure. So I went straight through from college to law school. When I was in college, though, I was a student government nerd. So I spent most of my days running my Senate campaigns and sitting in budget meetings. And I loved advocating for students. And I thought, if I like this much, I should probably make a career out of this. And I had no intention to be in politics at the time. And I started looking into what a legal career would look like. And during that time in undergrad, I was fortunate enough, we had a great entrepreneurial program at the University of Arizona. And one of my friends was starting his own startup and asked, hey, can you help us run the beta at the U of A? And I thought, well, as your elected official, absolutely, I'll help advocate for you on that part. And I have to tell you, being exposed to a community of startup folks who were so pumped, I thought, I want to represent tech companies. And so that's where the seed was planted. And I realized in that moment, not only do I want to go to law school, but I want to represent these types of clients. And I'm going to take the active jump to go to Silicon Valley to go to law school. So for me, it was, I was fortunate to have that aha moment so early in my life. And so then I went over to Santa Clara in Silicon Valley, and it was perfect because I was there at the forefront of technology development. A lot of our law were general counsels in-house. So I had a lot of opportunities at my fingertips.
Excellent. Yeah, that's amazing opportunity and a great reason to end up going to law school, of course. So tell me a little bit about law school. What was that experience like? Did you have internships? Did you work with professors closely, or did you work with other law students? Tell me a little bit about your experience in law school.
Sure. So other than first year, which I think across the board, people have a pretty similar experience that first year, being pretty difficult. But, second and third year, I realized as much as the books help, I want to feel confident when I graduate law school that I have seen as much actual legal work as I can. And so I took a non-traditional route. I was a full-time student, but I made the active decision to schedule my classes all blocked out on either 1 or 2 days. So I'd have full 3 days to work. And so during that time, I had a couple of internships. I did a traditional summer internship with Plantronics in Santa Cruz. And then I decided to work during the school year with Intuit, which is both fantastic companies. And I also ended up doing essentially full-time as the editor-in-chief of our high-tech law journal, which is a job in and of itself. So during law school, I had a lot of the hands-on work that complemented the specialized study that I was doing in intellectual property. So it was funny how sometimes things would pop up in class, and I'm like, wait a minute, and I'd see it at work, or vice versa. And so walking out of law school, I felt so much more prepared than had I just been in class.
So how did you get those internships? Because I think of companies like Intuit, and it's just like very impressive name. So what was your process like? I think first of all, it was impressive that you had and took the opportunity to schedule your semester so that you could do things during the school year. That's what a lot of law students don't think about, and a great learning point from you. But kind of, can you explain more the process of how you got those internships? And because it seems to be a very competitive environment for a lot of law students.
It is, and I have to tell you, especially in the Valley, you're competing against, people at Stanford and people at Berkeley, and it is tough. And I'll start with the first internship. That was, the stars aligned, frankly, because I had applied to, I want to say, and this is no joke, I had a spreadsheet about 60 jobs for my first summer. And at that point, I knew, go for it, strive for in-house. All of my colleagues were doing something with the judge, which is also very helpful depending on the line of work you want to do. But I knew I had to be in that in-house atmosphere if this was the kind of law I wanted to practice. Frankly, I started to doubt myself early in that process around January, like, oh, you're not qualified for this posting, or this isn't quite right. I got to tell you, 2 months later, I thought, well, as long as it's in-house, I'm applying. And it's kind of adjusted my perspective on just job hunting, even opportunity as a lawyer. Cast a wide net, because you never know when something truly is going to match up. And so I put out my resume, and people laughed at me that I wanted to do intellectual property law, especially anything related to patents. They were like, okay, you have a BA and you're a student government kid, so very funny.
Yeah, they typically were looking for a BS degree or some type of engineering or master's, or even more predominantly a PhD.
Right. And so, I even had people advise me not to go this route, that it was going to be a tough route. And I thought, challenge accepted. So I ended up applying to all these jobs, and everyone had a job in my class. And here I was twiddling my thumbs. And around April, I get a call, and I actually was caught off guard from Plantronics. I'm like, did I apply to this company? But it ended up being fantastic because went into the interview, and the general counsel had a vision of what the summer was going to look like. And I think an important thing about even interviewing for these types of jobs is always being open to, obviously, what the vision of the GC is, but feel free to ask the questions on your mind. So I asked her at that moment in the interview, hey, I love intellectual property. Do you have any issues coming up this summer that once I get all the other work done that I promised that I would do, could I'll work extra. I said, I'll work extra time. Could I do some of that work? And she loved it. She's like, yeah, she's like, go get her, absolutely. So once they extended the offer to me, then we sat down and we talked about what that summer was going to look like. And fortunately, they had actually been in the middle of a patent litigation. So I got all this exposure to what that looks like on the inside. So I think as a law student, in the interview, be curious, ask a lot of questions. And then when you do get the gig, feel free to, I mean, it's going to be, I mean, for example, I was commuting 40 to 50 minutes to this job. So I knew like it's going to be worth it in the long run, but be willing to take risks, be willing to be flexible, but also to ask for what you want as long as you achieve your job in the process.
And it sounds like you not only asked for what you wanted, but you did it in, first of all, a respectful manner, but then you had a very planned approach to it, which is key. I think that's excellent advice that you just shared. And I want to talk about a little bit of, you already touched on, was your experience with the High Tech Law Journal. And what kind of opportunities did your writing responsibilities open up for you?
Absolutely. So this, I think, may have been the most crucial. And I got a lot of flack from my classmates who said, it's third year, you should be hanging out. But there is so much value in tweaking not only your writing skills, so if anyone isn't on a journal yet, just FYI, what happens is the students, you select all the content. This is cutting edge, scholars who are writing on really cool issues. You are negotiating with the author. I was negotiating agreements at that time for reproduction of their work. And then you go in and you're actually editing the document. And part of that is you're building your network in the process. I have, kid you not, have crossed paths with someone who was an author when I was in Silicon Valley. Now I live in DC. I was like, wait a minute, I know that name. So, you start to have this network you're building. Plus, most journals and law reviews have boards of advisors. These are partners, general counsels, who are at your disposal for advice. And so it's a way to network and set yourself up for success later when you're job hunting, when you need professional advice. So it helped me from a professional and a social perspective. And it's great. We even planned a huge symposium as well. So in terms of big planning and what it shows to be committed, well-rounded, you're going to get the most bang for your buck, and it's at the university that you go to, the law school you go to. So it was a wonderful experience. I wouldn't have traded it for anything.
So what advice would you give to a current law student that may not have done as well in legal writing, or one of the courses that might get the attention of the professors or people that are in charge of a law review type organization? What advice would you give to them about getting that practical experience, of getting that experience of writing when they might not have a journal that they can walk right into or be a part of immediately?
Well, right. So I think it'll depend on, it's tough when you're in law school. You don't know if you want to be on the transactional side or the litigation side. But I will say one of the best experiences I got in writing was being a volunteer clerk for a magistrate judge. And what happens in that role is you're researching, you're writing, you're dissecting the briefs, and you're essentially doing, depending on the judge, first draft of that opinion. And when you're writing at that level, it's going to impact you for the rest of your career because you know how to be concise and to the point. When you're writing a persuasive brief, per se, like if you're actually a litigator, you get to be a little more wordy, a little more colorful, but to really be able to summarize something concisely and strongly, working under a judge is the best way to do that. And a lot of times, law students have that opportunity as an externship through their law school, and it's just a matter of the application process, getting good grades, and trust me, you'll walk out of there, it's like writing boot camp. You'll be ready to go. And so that's one opportunity. Or I encourage people to write their own articles. I know some law schools have a requirement to write some sort of thesis to graduate, or perhaps to graduate with honors. Take the initiative yourself. There's a lot of writing competitions actually for law students. I used to, just for fun because I love the topic, I used to compete. You could get tickets to the Grammys if you submitted this. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but
yes, I have actually. Yes, the Recording Academy does this.
I love music, and so for me, talking about the intellectual property implications of taking and sampling some music and doing things with it, that was just fun for me. But I got to practice my writing skills in the process. I never got to go to the Grammys, but I did. But the writing was great. So you're also building your own portfolio. So at the end of the day, you become a better lawyer, a better writer, and you're more informed. I mean, these were topics that then I became a semi-expert on, and that becomes a part of your day-to-day. So it's totally worth investing back in yourself and taking the time.
Well, I definitely want to circle back around to this because part of the reason why I reached out to you is because of Professor Eric Goldman and one of his blogs. But before we get there, I want to go ahead and ask you the question that everybody wants to know is, did you graduate from law school with a job? And if so, how did you do it?
Great question. So yes, I was one of the very fortunate folks to graduate from law school with a job. What I will say quickly is a lot of my friends didn't, and don't be afraid because they all got jobs quickly. So law students, don't worry. I went through the OCI process, and from just papers, you wouldn't have guessed that I would have been the #1 hire for a patent litigation job. But
and OCI means on-campus interviews, correct? For those that might not be familiar yet.
Yeah. So, folks come on campus from different law firms, they interview. After my first summer at Plantronics, I did a lot of patent litigation work. So I actually knew the ins and outs of how to have this conversation in an interview. On top of that, I also, in case I didn't get a job, I've signed up for 2 summer classes, one being legal writing and the other being a patent litigation course. So essentially I had drafted a ton of briefs that I would be doing on the reg in this class. And so when I went into that interview, I was able to have a substantive conversation with the folks that were doing the hiring beyond just like patents sound cool. It was, for them to have someone in front of them who didn't have a Bachelor of Science, who didn't have a PhD, to look them in the eye and say, I love technology, I have drafted these briefs, and you can throw anything at me this summer. And I think that really connected on that level with them. Whereas sometimes when you're a first year or second year, it's hard to convene an interview. Hey, I want to do blank. So, really worked hard to build in that first year as much as I could experience that I could convene an interview. Now, why did I pick patent litigation? I get bored easily, so I wanted to be on my toes. And I knew there were types of law that just, didn't match my personality. And this was dynamic when I saw it in-house, and I thought, let's give this a try. So I really believe that it was a mix of what I set myself up for summer one, plus being able to have that genuine conversation and connection in the interview that really did it. But I will say this, the firm that I first started working for, I applied, they had a posting, and I think it was for their DC job. I got rejected immediately because I didn't check the boxes. They reposted it, and I reapplied. Apparently I was feeling gutsy that day, and they ended up bringing me in. So my advice to law students is be the squeaky wheel. you will get the attention. Within reason, of course, but it ended up working out, because if I had just said, hey, they rejected me, I don't know where I'd be. My life would be very different. So really being persistent, but also genuine.
So being able to talk patent and patent litigation obviously is very impressive. So I know a lot of law students, like you said, they say that they're interested in technology and patent work. So you seem to have gotten that practical hands-on experience. So what advice would you give to somebody that hasn't gotten that yet? Obviously, you talked to them already about getting that internship and landing that, but what are some other ways that they can kind of get that experience, or even news outlets or something like that? What would you recommend just to stay abreast of issues going on with patent?
If for patent specifically, or just generally speaking?
Patent law would be a good one, but then also generally speaking, if you have a reference for that too.
Yeah, so with patent litigation, there are a lot of big name cases that you probably see in the news regularly. And so it's tough when you're a first year law student. You take civil procedure, but you don't really understand how a case proceeds. And so something as simple as taking a look, if you can actually find free versions of documents that have been filed, familiarize yourself with how a case proceeds. So, there's a lot of resources online. So understanding that you file the complaint and then an answer, and then there's motion practice to dismiss, things like that, where you can let the interviewer know, I'm aware this is how it looks, and ask informed questions. So say, like, where are your cases at right now? Are you doing discovery, which for those who don't know is where you're collecting facts for the case. So being able to ask those questions, and even though you may not have a lot of background in it, just shows that you've been thoughtful, perhaps more so than the average law student who has only gone through civil procedure. So understanding how a case works. And also, decide. I was asked on the spot, what technology areas do you want to do if you don't have a BS? And I was like, I love hardware and software. And they're like, could you read code? And I said, well, back when I had a MySpace when I was in middle school, I taught myself how to code HTML.
Yes.
They laughed at me, but it's true. So it shows I can overcome those hurdles. And so thinking outside the box, and just generally speaking, familiarizing yourself. Let's say you want to do corporate transactional work. There's a lot of information on deals, on IPOs. Just kind of educate yourself on what's going on, and then before the interview, what clients that particular firm serves. So you're able to have an educated conversation, or just ask them, hey, I saw about this. Could you tell me more? Were you involved in it? And maybe that person wasn't, but it shows you've done diligence beyond just doing the basic research of, oh, they have 500 attorneys,
Exactly. And so kind of tell me more about right after law school, what happened after you finished the bar exam? Tell me more about that process after you graduated and then took the bar exam and got that behind you.
Sure. So after my 3-day California bar exam, I found out that the law firm that hired me was actually going to delay all the first years from starting from September to January. And apparently this happens a lot. It's a business decision. And I didn't know that as a third-year law student. So a lot of my friends took that as an opportunity, my colleagues, to just kind of hang out, enjoy the time off. I don't know how to hang out. I love to do. And so what I ended up doing was my future boss at my office, I sent her an email and said, hey, I want to be as useful as possible to you when I start. What are some things I should consider? And she said, it's funny you ask. One of our someone she used to work with became a judge. And she sent him an email and said, I have this bright girl who really wants to work and volunteer. Do you have space? And apparently he had been very overwhelmed, Judge Graywall, because he had been helping out with the Apple Samsung case at that time. This is on top of his regular calendar.
Just a small case, just a small one.
Small case. It was a lot. And so he had 2 full-time paid clerks. But I told him, no pay, I will volunteer because I want to learn. And so I went in for most of the week. I would, normal hours. And I have to tell you, it was one of the best experiences I've had because I wasn't just exposed to patent litigation, but I got to see copyright issues, criminal issues, contract issues, which I'll get to later, which are important now in what I do. But and just understanding the decorum of court. I mean, that was leaps and bounds for when I had my first trial where nothing was a surprise. And most importantly, working on my writing under a very educated and intelligent judge who was able to guide me in that process and really mentor me. And so, taking that downtime and turning it into a learning opportunity is something I recommend to all law students because realistically, after you take the bar, if you don't have a job coming to law school, there's going to be some time while you're waiting for bar results, and a lot of firms or companies won't hire you until you're an actual licensed attorney, which may put you out until December of the year you graduate. So I highly recommend use that time to invest back in yourself. Sometimes it won't pay the bills to find a way to do that, if it means living back at home or checking up with friends, but really just invest back in yourself because there's no other time in your life you'll have that opportunity.
Exactly. And I think another resource, we talked a lot about IP, obviously, but I think some excellent resources are your local bar association. There are plenty of nonprofit local organizations that you can get involved with as a recent grad that need that help. And that's a great resource I would recommend as well, on top of the excellent advice that you gave. So go ahead.
Also fellowships. And yeah, if you aren't ready to jump in yet, do a 1-year fellowship with a really cool organization in the intellectual property world, Electronic Frontier Foundation, or something where you get exposed to real work, but you're a fellow for that year and you have time to decide what you want to do. And it's a lot of my friends have done that and they found it so rewarding.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and it sounds like it was just unexpected what happened to you getting delayed with the start of your job. But aside from that, and I wouldn't really deem that a struggle, but were there other times or experiences you faced where you were struggling and you had to kind of work your way out of it, either as a law student or as a recent grad or as a young attorney?
Absolutely. So when I started my career, so I will say now I do a little bit of patent litigation, but mostly tech transactions. When I first started full-time patent litigation, people they would look at me and think, okay, that's cute. You want to be a patent litigator. And, part of that process, and I will admit, I knew what I was getting into. And the struggle was proving that not only could I learn the technology, but that I could articulate it in a technical way, but also in a non-technical way. And that I learned, part of the struggle sometimes is learning what your value is. And I realized when I was on these teams that, wait a minute, because I am the layperson and I'm learning, I'm actually able to translate this better to a jury or a judge than someone who is perhaps more technical. So that struggle was tough, and really having to overcome assumptions about me by working the extra hours and the extra time to get up to speed. But it made me a more focused and diligent attorney, and also taught me not to judge other folks in that process. I think that, you come across opposing counsel sometimes or clients, and you have to always keep an open mind, because the great thing about being a lawyer is you're surrounded by brilliant people all the time. So really giving that opportunity to shine. And so that struggle taught me a lot, and I apply it every day now.
Awesome. I love to hear that. That's amazing advice. And yes, I feel like as a young lawyer, there are always going to be times that you face, even during internships as a law student, there are going to be times where you're facing situations and encountering experiences where you don't have a clue of what you're doing. And that's where, as you mentioned earlier, it's so important to ask those questions, to just constantly be asking questions and not be afraid of that approach. So wonderful. So one of the final questions I have for you is, how do you think current law students can stand out in today's job market?
It's a tough market. I think what comes through most is being genuine. And what I've learned, I mentor law students sometimes too. as a profession, we feel overwhelmed with the idea of networking. That has been the single most important part of my career and my life, whether that be for finding writing opportunities, speaking opportunities. Strive as a law student early on to create genuine relationships, not only with your classmates, but with your professors, and then with the folks who do hire you for externships and internships and beyond. You know, if you're going to go to a networking event, connect with someone who loves the Yankees like you do, or who maybe loves karaoke. As silly as that sounds, that's the way to really facilitate a relationship versus, which we all did this first year. You roll into a networking event and you just start spewing, I'm in contracts and I do this. That's not going, it's going to overwhelm people as well. Think of, it's just a social situation. And if you do that, you're going to stand apart from your peers. Because if you create a real relationship with someone and foster it. So one of the things that I do is the folks that I used to work with in-house, I send them a holiday card every year. I know where they work, and just reconnect and see how they're doing. And, I've built fantastic relationships with those people, and be genuine in your purpose. So I just enjoy their company and I want to keep in touch with them. Will that ever turn to, business or potential job? Nobody knows. But you start to build this great network of people who you have a passion. You're in law school for a reason. So be around people who likely want to nerd out with you about those topics. And that's so important. I saw a lot of people just focus on, work, go to my job. If they kind of shut out all their classmates. Your classmates are going to be the people who advocate for you to get a job, who are going to help you transfer to a new gig, who are going to be your client someday. So that behavior is going to set you apart from your peers first and foremost. And second of all, it's just intellectual curiosity and asking for work. We're all overwhelmed. You shouldn't ask for work if you're at full capacity. But when you're an intern, and especially when you're a young attorney, if you do good work and you don't just sit there and think, okay, now I have 10 minutes to sit, and actually just say, hey, this looks cool, can I do that? Or even broader, just say, how can I help you? That is one of the best questions you can ask as a young attorney, as an intern, even as a law student to one of your professors. You need a research person to help you. People do need help, and sometimes they're afraid to ask, or they don't know where you are. And so say, how can I help you? At the base of what we do, all of us who are attorneys, we are a service profession. So you should feel confident in asking that question, comfortable in asking it, and it'll open up a world to you that your peers perhaps are being closed out from because they aren't asking. I ended up, so a quick segue, I had quiet time my first year of practice, and I reached out to all the offices at my firm beyond my California office. And now the partner I work with mainly was a partner who said, yeah, I have this random question. It's a tech transaction issue related to retransmission of a TV show. And now he and I are the tech transaction folks at the firm. It's just the two of us. And I've had an opportunity to build a practice in a way that I never anticipated. Had I not asked, I don't know what my career would look like. So asking questions and asking for work will set you apart in all ways, no matter your level.
So one of the ways that I found you was through Professor Eric Goldman, who runs a blog called the Legal, oh my gosh, I'm going to butcher it, but it's the Marketing and Technology Law Blog. And he published an article that you had actually written about the Law of Emojis. So can you tell me more about that? It's obviously a very interesting and culturally relevant topic. So talk to me more about that.
So sure, absolutely. So Eric Goldman is one of the people in my posse that I love to nerd out with. Eric was one of my professors at Santa Clara, and he taught internet law. And he and I have a love for emoji. It's one of those things that, a lot of us use them regularly. And I had started writing last year on the topic because I was talking to one of my friends who does a lot of litigation, and she's in family law. And she was telling me, I don't know what to do with this. We're dealing with these text message chains. There's a ton of emoji. I wonder how the rules of evidence would deal with this. And I start laughing, and she's like, you should write about this. And so I looked at her and I said, you're right, I should write about this. So I wondered, what's the state of the law in emojis? So as a law student or a young attorney, be curious. I had a full day of work, a 12-hour day. I came home, and instead of perhaps binge watching something on Netflix, I decided to do more research. And I started looking into, there's a small body of law on what's happened with emoticons and emoji. And taking the experience I'd had with litigation, experience with some transactional stuff, I thought, how do we make sense of this? And I ended up writing an article, and it was fortunate enough to get published in an online provider, and it kind of blew up. I mean, sometimes you put your thoughts into the world and it comes back to you in a really cool way. So within a couple weeks of putting that article online, I had someone reach out to me who said, hey, you posed a question about, in litigation, how would you take evidence that has emoji and search for a particular emoji? Guess what? He goes, me and my team are creating technology to do that. And I was mind blown. Let's talk about it. So he and I started chatting, and we decided we should talk about this publicly. I was like, yeah, let's do it. So he found out a talking opportunity for us. We went to DC Legal Hackers, and it was a full audience, had an awesome conversation with him, myself, and then a gentleman who had been writing for The Atlantic on a lot of emoji issues. So it was a fun conversation, pop culture meets the law, meets technology, and I realized there's something here. So, taking your intellectual curiosity and growing it. And recently, Eric reached out to me, because of course I share, I'm posting this article on LinkedIn or on Facebook, and Eric goes, I actually just wrote a comprehensive piece on this. Let's chat about it. And it's crazy as a former law student to have your law professor ask you for notes on a paper. I was so honored. And so you never know in life, again, when you share and nerd out, people will nerd out back with you. And so Eric and I went back and forth in the paper, and he was so nice to cite to my paper. And then now as emoji stuff comes up, we just ping each other, have you seen this? What about this? So this recent blog that he and I both co-authored, I saw it come up on Twitter. I said, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And immediately it just becomes the synergy. It's like, let's write something. This is actually interesting. We haven't seen it in the context of contract negotiation. And you do, tech transactions. And so it was organic. And the best advice I have, again, even as a law student, you can do this. Be intellectually curious. If it sounds a little crazy, other people are probably thinking of it too. And feel free to be a trailblazer. And so that's turned into a thing now where, Joe is the gentleman who has created this technology that searches for emoji. But we're going to be speaking on podcasts now in the next couple months about these issues. Eric and I are probably going to do something at some point. And so you start to become a subject matter expert. And because you're so aware of the field of law, it's easy to stay abreast of it. And so I really recommend, if you have any kind of curiosity, just feed it. Write about it. Go speak about it. You get to build your persona as a lawyer. And this is a fun, granted, do I practice emoji law? By no means, but am I someone who investigates how technology disrupts the law and existing practice? Absolutely. And I've written on that. So I think taking that and channeling it is the best way to make connections, but also show you're a thought leader as a lawyer.
Wonderful. Yes, I think that is a perfect piece of advice to end on. Is there anything else? I want to give you one opportunity to share. Is there anything else you'd like to tell law students, or advice, anything to close out with? I mean, I think that was perfect what you just shared, but I'll give you the opportunity if there is anything else.
As a law student, I think we spend a lot of time worrying, and we're always comparing ourselves to others in our class. And the best piece of advice I received and I pass on is compete with yourself. At the end of the day, focus on you. Know that you're smart and qualified and that you're supposed to be at the table. Ask for what you want and believe in yourself ultimately. The only person you need to compare yourself to is you. And y'all are great. And you're already taking a step beyond your peers by watching this fantastic video. So good for you, and get out there and go get it. And thank you so much for this opportunity.
Excellent. And so what's the best way for people to reach out to you if they want to follow up or just connect with you? What's the best way for them to contact you?
So my initials are GZ, and I do IP law. So my Twitter handle is IP with GZ. So please follow me. Feel free to tweet at me. Also, you can check out my LinkedIn or whatever. I'm happy to answer questions. I have mentored plenty of law students, and I know you may have questions about intellectual property law, or maybe you have an emoji question. Happy to answer. But feel free to reach out, and let's make the law as awesome as we can.
That's amazing. Yes, I will put links to all of those down below in the description if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening to the podcast audio version, they're in the show notes down below as well. So thank you again. And you had some awesome advice, Gabriella. I love everything that you shared. So thank you.
Thank you.
That wraps up this episode. Again, please remember to subscribe down below if you're watching on YouTube. Click that subscribe button and subscribe to your favorite podcast app, and share this with a friend. It really helps to let other people know about the show, increase the number of people watching and listening each week. And reach out to me if you have any questions, comments. I'm always happy to discuss things on Twitter or through email or through my website. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Law School Strategy Podcast. Check out lawschoolstrategy.com and make sure you subscribe to never miss an episode of the Law School Strategy Podcast. We're on all podcast apps and on YouTube, so leave a review. Connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Remember, nothing in this podcast should be considered legal advice. Please consult with an attorney on any legal issues you may be facing.